Good morning. This lesson is all about me and how to look after me. Thank you.
Good morning. Oh, these lockdown haircuts. Okay, so today's lesson is focused upon how do we produce enough food for that growing human population without affecting ecosystems too much. And two key words really, well three. Factory farming, and that's why I put the word intensive on here as well. Factory farming. I'll try and highlight that word. That's better. So intensive farming and factory farming mean the same thing. And it's a type of farming where you're mass producing animals by keeping them in a very small place and restricting the amount of energy they use. And efficiency of farming, and efficiency is used in physics and throughout science and in everyday language. Efficiency is how much of something is useful. So if we use our time really efficiently, then we've used our time well and we haven't wasted much of it. If we use our energy really efficiently, and so if we are farming efficiently, it means a lot of the food we give to the animals is turning into meat for the animals for us to eat. So here we have some chickens roaming around in a field. Again, I just went to the wrong highlighter. So there's a lovely happy chicken roaming around in a field. And here are some chickens who live in a restricted space, but they've got a yard to wander around in down the bottom right hand corner, and they've got an inside area as well where they'll spend some of the time in and out, some time out. And here is a massive, great big factory, just a great big building where we can control the temperature, and here are millions of chickens kept together. So in terms of energy, which ones there will be losing most energy in the activities they do each day? Okay, once you've had a little think about that and written down your answer about energy loss, just a couple of short videos on how you farm science teachers.
As you can see from these free range science teachers, look at them enjoying the open air, having a happy, good standard of living, choosing food to eat from the ground whenever they wish, grazing. Oh, a little bit of grass there and a dandelion. And growing in a nice, sustainable way, ready for market. However, letting them run around outside, animals use up energy, keeping warm, they use up energy running around and moving. So if you can restrict the animals' movement by keeping them in an enclosed space, they might not be as happy, but they're not wasting energy running around or staying warm. I can control the temperature. I can even give them loads of antibiotics so they don't get infected, and therefore keep them nice and healthy, ready for market faster, because they can put all their energy into growing. Oh, not so happy, but more money for me.
Okay, so factory and intensive farming. As we saw with Mrs. Walker and Mr. O'Neill, if you allow them to roam outside, they're going to use lots of energy in moving. So what we could do is, again, wrong pen, what we could do is we could restrict their movement. If we can cut down on the amount of energy they use in moving, maybe they'll put that energy into growing and putting the meat on faster. Again, rather than letting them outside to eat grass and other plants, etc., if we give them high energy food sources and we give them lots of protein, such as a bodybuilder would eat and stuff, we can get them to put meat on faster so they grow quicker. That means we can make more money and more food faster. If we control their food and make sure we know exactly what they eat, we can make sure it's as cheap as possible and yet makes them grow fast. If we keep them warm and control the temperature they're in, then they're not using up energy staying warm. Again, that energy will be put into growth. And then because they're all close together, they could easily get infections and it could spread throughout the whole group. And that happens quite often. So if we give them antibiotics already, then the antibiotics are stopping them getting those infections. The problem for us is, do we really want to be eating meat that is produced in conditions where animals are kept in really crowded conditions and fed chemicals and antibiotics as they're grown? Or would we prefer to eat meat that's been raised in a more humane way where they can roam outside and free range? And you'll often see In a supermarket, they've got the free range and organic versions of foods, and then they've got the normal versions of foods, which could come from intensive or factory farming. Talk more about that at the end. Very similar with fish. Fish is a great food source. Fish stocks have gone down. So fish farming, again here's a fish farm in a river, and what they've done here is they've put pens here, so the fish are all kept in one place, and they can move within that space, but then they can be fed. So here's the person at the top here sprinkling the food pellets in, so they can put the food into the water. The fish are kept there. You don't have to go to all the hassle of going and catching the fish. The fish aren't swimming wildly in the river, so therefore they're not using much energy, and we can carefully control what the fish are eating, so more of them survive and don't get ate by predators and stuff. So fish farming is definitely one of the future ways to get a good food supply with a growing human population. So some of the issues we've had with fishing over the years is, for example, the population of cod in the North Sea. So in the North Sea, sorry that came on, in the North Sea what we've got is, we had during the 1960s, 70s and 80s, cod, our main fish and chips fish, being massively overfished, and then the fish stocks going down, too many boats, too many being caught, and not enough left there to carry on breeding, so the population decreased. So in terms of that, what controls can we put in place? Well, there's now fishing quotas in place. Only a certain number are allowed to be caught, and only certain boats are given licenses. So each boat from different nationalities are given a number of trips they can make and how much fish they can catch. They also have to use nets of a certain size, and there's a better picture of that on the next slide. So these nets are a modern type of invention. Here, there's not a really good colour highlighter, I'll try and change. No, on a dark background it doesn't really work. Try a different one, one last time. No. So those nets, those lights you can see, those circles, it's allowing the small fish to escape. Those small fish can escape, and when the small fish escape, they can breed still. So those small fish can escape and breed and carry on the population. So if we're careful with how many fish we catch and how we make sure that the young fish survive, we can actually have fish stocks for a long time. So please could you answer these questions in your books and pause here, and then in about, well, you pause and then however long it takes you, and then we'll pop through the questions answers. Okay, so question number 1, how does restricting the movement of animals and controlling the temperature surroundings improve efficiency? That's about, instead of the energy they got from their food going into moving or staying warm, the energy is going into growing meat faster. So therefore that produces more food for people. What does the term factory farming mean? Well, factory farming means growing animals in a crowded space en masse, feeding them and carefully controlling their temperature, and very intensive farming. You only need a small amount of land, you can have a lot of animals, unlike traditional farming. Why are fish stocks declining? Well, fish stocks are declining because of overfishing. Why is it a problem? Well, because the food won't be there for the future. And which ways the fish stocks can be conserved? Well, we can have limits on the amount we fish, and we can make sure that the nets we're using aren't catching the smaller fish, so that they get a chance to grow, reproduce, and then the fish population stays high. Right, hopefully you've got all those. In terms of advantages and disadvantages, there's a couple of slides here at the end. So as you've gone through this video, if you didn't pick up on these points, worth having a quick look. Have you got all of these in your notes? Okay, another advantage here with the fish farms, not only can you get lots of fish quickly, but the wild fish populations get a chance to recover if we're growing fish in fish farms that for our food sources. Disadvantages obviously are, if one fish gets a disease and they're all crowded together, it's much more likely, unless the fish do social distancing, it's a lot more likely that they'll be passed on. And exactly the same with intensive farming, advantages and disadvantages. Here, when it's talking about killing weeds, obviously that's for crops, for plants. If you have fewer pests to eat the crops because you're using the pesticides we talked about in water pollution, feeding that high protein, restricting the movement, controlling the temperature, just make sure you've got all of the advantages really in producing more food, but then the disadvantages, that confinement of animals in a small space, the spread of disease, they can't move around, they can injure themselves and they're trapped in a very small place in cramped conditions, and the slaughtering of them could well be inhumane, but that's not always the case. That would depend upon the individual farmer and meat producer. And then last thing, we mark our food in this country, and if your food contains this mark, so if it contains that red tractor on your meat packaging, that means that it's come from a farm that had to meet certain standards. So for example, here it says allowing only a certain number of chickens in a certain area. So it's not necessarily saying it's perfect, or it's not all the animals are very happy and grown exactly the way maybe some people think they should, but what it is saying is it's fairly treated, it's met certain standards, it hasn't been intensively factory farmed. Okay, thanks for listening.
Thank you for watching. Now, hand your work in. There's a good child.